All right, great. Thanks, Jerry, Steve, and Matt. And thanks to all the FANG members for allowing me to present here. As demonstrated by my camera not working this morning, I thought I would demonstrate one of the job search mistakes that you want to avoid. That is making sure your equipment works. So I tested it last night. I think I know what happened. I was testing some video that I'm going to show, and I should have rebooted my computer to make sure it goes back to the original settings. So, of course, I thought of that after we started talking here. So let's lesson to be learned. That's write that down. That's one mistake. Make sure you avoid. So my background, I'm with RubinBrown. You probably never heard of RubinBrown. I never heard of RubinBrown. We're a CPA firm. We've been around about 70 years, primarily in St. Louis. We opened up a Chicago office a few years ago. I joined the firm in January of 2020 to lead the consulting, to build the consulting practice here. And in addition to the traditional consulting services that you get with a CPA firm, I also do some interim placements of CFOs, internal audit folks, project managers, and accounting staff. Prior to that, immediately prior to that, I was at the staffing firm that Jerry mentioned, 17 years. Interesting, I started there. It was going to be a 6-month experiment to see how it worked out, and ended up being there for 17 years. I loved it. I was on the temporary side, management resources as a senior level finance and accounting group within Robert Half. So it's most of the folks here in FANG would fall into that group. So providing interim and project resources in the traditional accounting and finance fields. I happened to move into a national role where I was responsible for large teams of people going out on projects. 50. It would not be unusual to have 20 to 50 people or even more on a project, but I had to interview all of them and recommend them to the client, and then be responsible for them. So added it up one day, and it's well over 4,000 people that I placed, and that means I probably interviewed triple or quadruple the number of candidates to get to that point. So I have seen just about anything that you would see wrong with a resume or an interviewing process or an interviewing style or anything. So that's the basis of, I'm not going to name names, but it's the basis of this presentation. I'm going to share with you what I've seen mistakes other people made. Then I do some speaking at local community colleges. Mostly these are accounting students, experienced folks going back to get their accounting degree, and they need some help in finding a job. So I do that at the local colleges. So here's the topics. Got them in 6 different categories. Mistakes you make with, and again, these are written in the negative, right? So the mistakes you want to avoid. I'll then tell you what the positive is or what you should be doing. So mistakes you make with the resume, networking, interviewing, using Zoom, follow up, social media, and then leave it for questions at the end. You can ask questions throughout. Interrupt me. Jerry's going to monitor the chat for me. I may say some things here that are controversial in your mind or provocative. That's okay. You can challenge me on it. I'll give you my reasoning why I suggest we do it this way. And again, you're probably not making all of these mistakes. You're probably making some of them. Making these mistakes doesn't mean you're not going to get the job, but it just, if you can avoid them, it's going to give you an edge. And in a job market that's competitive, you want to get every edge you can get. You may ask, well, what do you mean it's competitive? Don't we have record employment participation and record low unemployment? Well, that's true, but you probably also heard of what they're calling the Great Resignation, and that is people leaving their current jobs for other jobs. So not only do you have to compete with the unemployed, you also have to compete with people who are currently employed looking to better their position. So again, it's important for you to have an edge, or at least not to inflict some of these self-inflicted wounds here by making these mistakes. So let's get to it. Resume mistakes. For experienced people, mistake you make is having more than 2 pages of resume. Don't do it. Stick to 2 pages. Having a one-page resume for an experienced person is probably an equal mistake. So make it a two-page resume. You don't need to list every single job you've ever done. I'd say go back 15 years at the most, and maybe make a reference, a one-line reference to some prior experience, but don't go more than 2 pages. It just don't get read. Now, when I switched jobs from Robert Half to RubinBrown, I had a 4-page resume. How did I do that? I had 2 pages, and then I had an appendix with some additional information. So that's a technique you can use. I didn't always send the appendix, but the 2-pager was the one I used to get the interview. Then I followed up with the 4-pager that had the appendix. The appendix, in my case, included my industry experience, the clients I worked with, and some software experience. That was more important for the types of roles that I was pursuing. And you do not include a cover letter. So cover letters are out. There's some controversy about that. I see a lot of that written in the news on job searching sites or whatever. People don't read cover letters. They get separated from the resume, so that defeats its purpose. The better move is to tailor your resume for each job. Don't rely on a cover letter to tailor a generic resume. Second mistake, listing responsibilities instead of accomplishments. I see this all the time, drives me crazy. Nobody cares what your responsibilities were. They want to know what you accomplished. And then when you list the accomplishments, you got to quantify it. Did you save money? If you reduce the close cycle or reduce some other process, how many days or weeks did you save? If you're involved in sales or made sale, how many sales did you make? I mean, those are the examples of quantifying. If you reduced receivables, how many days did you reduce receivables? What was the value of that? What was the impact, financial impact? And then don't include irrelevant information. There's no need for personal information, no objective statement. That might be controversial. A lot of us all grew up, got to have an objective statement. It's got to be the first thing in it doesn't. It's about them. The objective statement is what we used to do when it was, it's more focused about us, what we want. In this case, it's about the employer. What does the employer want? And so replace the objective statement with an executive summary or some little snapshot, a paragraph or two, or I'm sorry, a sentence or two, no more than a paragraph, just explaining what your highlights are. And then my pet peeve here, the last one, is people listing that they are an expert at Outlook, Word, and Excel. Everybody is an expert at Outlook, Word, and Excel. You don't need to list that. Now, if you have exceptional Excel skills and you can be specific, like pivot tables and other, I'm not an expert in Excel, so I can't even list what those might be, but some advanced skills, okay, that might be noteworthy to put on the resume. But it cracks me up when I see people touting the fact that they know how to use email. You don't need that on your resume. References available upon request. Again, it takes up real estate on your resume. It's not necessary. Everybody knows they can get references from you. You don't need to put that on there. Typos. Again, my pet peeve. Grammatical errors and typos. These are the highlights that I see constantly. And again, the examples I'm using, these are not one-offs. I've seen this enough times that it's made my list. That's why they're here. Manger instead of manager drives me crazy. I see this all the time. Now it passes through your spell check because manger is a legitimate word. But unless you're touting the fact that you worked in a nativity scene, manger doesn't belong on your resume. Now somebody told me that you can go in and edit your spell check to make sure that even if you do type manger, it changes it to manager. I don't know how to do that, but if manager is somewhere on your resume, you want to make sure you look for that. HIPAA, with the acronym in the wrong order, or 2 P's instead of 2 A's. Again, hard to have credibility when you say you know your way around HIPAA when you can't spell it correctly. Same thing with Sarbanes-Oxley. It's got to be with the hyphen. Sometimes it's spelled incorrect. Sometimes it's L-Y. Sometimes it's E-L-Y. I've seen a lot of variations of that. It's just, SOX, S-O-X in all caps. That's okay. The next one, apostrophe catastrophe. Drives me crazy, people putting apostrophes incorrectly in the resume. I had a colleague who drove me crazy with that when in reviewing his work. That even got him this mask that you see here on the right. The apostrophes do not make nouns plural. So can everybody see that?
Yep.
So again, be careful with apostrophes and using contractions properly and possessive appropriately. Again, if you're not sure, you're not good at this, get somebody else to read it for you and edit it for you who does know. Silly or unprofessional email addresses, your nickname, or you and your spouse share an email address, and so it's Bill and Sally, some other silly extension. It doesn't cost much. In fact, it may even be free. I haven't checked it lately. To get a professional email address, it's something like firstname.lastname@gmail.com. Go the extra step and get a professional looking email address. You're doing yourself a disservice by not doing that. I hate seeing the use of I or me in the resume. Use a third person. You don't talk. We all know you're talking about yourself if you list your accomplishments. You don't need to start sentences or sections with "I did this" or "I performed this" or "I accomplished." We know it's you. It's just a distraction, and it just doesn't read right. The resume doesn't have to have full sentences. It can have just phrases and the keywords, and just to get the point across. And I and me just distracts from all that. I've seen resumes that, we all want to be team players and we worked as a team. And so we tend to write in a resume, I assisted with, and then list the accomplishments. And after seeing enough of that, I get the impression that maybe I should hire your teammates because it sounds like you're not the guy. I try to coach people on this and say, look, your resume is not a deposition. You don't need to say who else worked with on the project, but if you assisted with the budget, just write that you prepared the budget. No one's asking or assuming that you prepared the budget on your own. They know you had assistance with it, but this is a resume touting your experience, what you've accomplished. You can say you prepared, or don't even say you prepared, just say prepared annual budget or whatever it is that you're accomplished. I'll stop there. I saw the chat line has got about 10 questions there. Jerry, is there anything I need to address now?
Matt, what'd you find?
But
I don't believe there are any questions yet. People are putting in their contact
Oh,
information.
yeah, right,
Yeah.
right. Yeah, no questions yet, Mike.
all right.
Yeah, I do
Got
have a question. I just didn't type it in. And that would
Sure.
be something like font size to improve readability. So depending upon what the objective is of the resume, one could be getting through the algorithm that goes through HR. The other one could be, sending your detailed background to a potential contact. And so, I've sort of struggled between, the font size, the lower the font size, obviously the more content, the larger the font size, you have maybe less relevant content. So I just wanted to get a sense as to your thoughts regarding how to approach that.
Yeah, I find that if you are struggling with lowering the font size to include more content, you probably have too much content.
Okay.
So I would lean towards making it readable without people having to expand the screen and reducing content. More more isn't necessarily better in this case.
Okay.
Just do some editing, and I understand what you're saying about keywords on the ATS. or the
Exactly.
applicant terms. But that's where tailoring your resume for each position you're going after comes into play. You know, if they're looking for a VP of finance and you are a finance director, you better make sure you edit your resume to make sure you're using the words they use. So you
Yes.
were a VP of finance, for example. So, all right. Thanks
Okay,
for
fair
the
enough. Thank you.
question.
So
Okay.
on that, just Mike, on that point though, would you say a 10 point to 12 point would be an appropriate range for maximum readability?
Yeah, I think I use 11 point, but yeah, I have trouble with my own eyes with a 10 point, but the 11 point and 12 point I think is appropriate.
Okay,
Got it.
thanks.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Yep. All right. Not, excuse me, not clearly showing that you qualify for the job. So make sure that you're reading the job description and make sure that your resume highlights the skill, excuse me, the skills that they're looking for on that job description. So again, go back to tailoring and use the keywords, use the job, put in the job, the accomplishments that match the responsibilities that they're looking for. Similar to that, one size doesn't fit all, cover letter doesn't cure this little or no resume customization. You've got to customize your resume for every position you're going after. Again, you're not mass emailing your resumes, so there shouldn't be an issue. And you should be doing some research about the company to find out not only about this position, but other positions that they're looking for. And you maybe pick up some tips. You know, maybe they don't list, for example, what software tool, what ERP software they're using in the resume, in the position they're advertising that you're interested in. But maybe they did in a previous job posting. So you can find different tidbits or different tips that you can add into your resume to cover that. If you find out that they use SAP or they use Great Plains or whatever, you might want to incorporate that into your resume. And then formatting, mistake is using formatting that doesn't work with the applicant tracking system. So here's something I'm going to tell you that others may not tell you. Always put it in Microsoft Word, not PDF. PDF does you a disservice. Unless the job spec says PDF resumes only, don't do it. Use Microsoft Word. Couple of reasons. Microsoft Word format is friendlier with applicant tracking systems. PDFs make the whole thing look like an image, and it's not easy to parse the keywords out of that in a lot of applicant tracking systems. Some of the applicant tracking systems are getting better and they can handle that. A lot of them still don't do that. The other reason is if you're working with a recruiter, the first thing they do when they get your resume is they want to edit it to put their logo on it or put to get rid of your contact information and replace it with theirs because they want the control of the client. The client comes back to them, not you. You sending them a PDF that they can't edit just waste their time and frankly puts you at the bottom of the pile. I'm telling you this as an insider. You know, you're the bottom of the pile of candidates I'm going to work with, because now I got to go back and ask you to put it in a different format for me, and that's going to take some time, and I'm working against the clock. Now, as a staffing person, they work on commission. They get a commission every time they make a placement. They don't get paid to go back and forth with you to get your resume in the right format. They're working. One, they want to get the position filled quickly. Two, they know they're working against competition, and so their competitor every day is sending in qualified candidates. And if they got to screw around with your resume because it's in the PDF instead of Word, that just works against their nature and what they're trying to accomplish. So it doesn't do you very much good to put a document in PDF. I always think about that too. Like, what are we so afraid of? Why do we have to put in a PDF? Protects the document, right? So nobody can change it. Have you ever heard of anybody who was hired because the employer modified their resume to add some skills that they didn't have and hired them, and then later fired them because it turns out they lied on their resume. I mean, it doesn't happen. So what are we protecting with the PDF? I don't get it. Sometimes use a PDF because it's makes it a smaller format. So when it's smaller file, so it's easier to send. But again, if you've got something that's a large document, maybe you've got other issues with your resume that you shouldn't be making it that big in the first place. Or sometimes use a PDF because it's easier to read on multiple devices on a phone or something like that. You know, that's a legitimate reason. But I would say unless it's specified to do something else, always use Microsoft Word as a resume format. All right, let's skip to head over to networking. What do we do at networking events? Networking events and just networking in general with FANG or with any other group. So one thing, mistakes people make is they keep the job search a secret. I get it. If you're out of work, maybe you're embarrassed. You don't want people to know that you say that you started your own business and you're doing some consulting or whatever, and it's a little bit different than letting people know you're actively looking for work. So that, I think that's a mistake. You should be telling people, and people are willing to help, and people want to help. You'd be surprised how people will help you if you just ask for it. Second is, in addition to letting people know, your colleagues, your friends, your acquaintances, your fellow association members, that you're looking for a job, reach out for professional help. Recruiters, obviously, resume writers, other associations. You guys all know this with FANG, that different ways you can post your resumes and look for help, and career coaches. Now, I've been writing resumes or reviewing resumes and coaching people for 17 years at Robert Half. But when I was looking to make a job change, I hired a resume writer. A buddy of mine used to work for me. He's got his business. I know I needed help. Now, I thought I wrote a pretty good resume. I sent it to him, and he ripped it to shreds. But he did a terrific job. And it's tough to do, even if you know everything you're supposed to do. Trying to write the accomplishments for yourself is just a tough thing to do. And the guy who did the writing for me was able to highlight things that I didn't think was that big of a deal, but he's right, it was, and to the reader it would be a big deal. He challenged me in a few things where I didn't think I needed to have quantifying the results, or didn't think the results were there, but he challenged me on some of that thinking. And I think we came up with a much better product than I would have on my own. So I highly recommend seeking out a resume writer and somebody who knows something about. I know there's a lot of people online who claim, send me $50 and I'll write your resume for you. I'm not talking about those people. To find somebody who specializes in, finance and accounting or whatever your field is, who can do that type of work.
Hi, Mike.
And also, I'll just put in a plug.
Mike.
Yeah. Yep.
This is Steve. To what degree have you seen the customization of the resumes be effective, and how they're best used? The limit to the number of them. What's kind of the magic there in tailoring it to a specific job or opportunity?
Yeah, I think it's essential. I think it's a mistake to just go with a generic resume and then have a cover letter or cover email to then make it relevant to the job description. Again, the email or the cover letter is not going to make it through the process, and it's going to only be the resume. So if your resume doesn't stand on its own and show that it's a good fit, that it's got the right keywords within the body of that resume, that's a mistake. You're going to be you're lessening your chances of success there. So I think it's critical to customize your resume each time you send it, for a different opportunity.
I have a question.
Sure.
Now I have a question off of that question. I was just thinking about it, and I'm in a pretty. I'm a corporate credit manager, and I do deal with both international and small companies. But if I wanted to, what if my resume is fairly static because my skill sets are needed most of the time for a credit professional, but I go ahead and in the summary hit specifics to that industry or to that company. I talked to a company once, and way back in my history, I worked in retail in the same industry, but it didn't show up anywhere in my resume. What if I just change my summary to be the first thing that they see and say, hey, I was in your industry, by the way. I know a little bit about you. And what if I just massage that summary statement if I plan to keep everything else pretty static?
Yeah, I think that's a good approach. There may also be certain things you could rephrase, certain accomplishments that you could rephrase to be more that retail, use more of the retail language or terminology. I would not change your resume format to more of a functional resume instead of chronological. That screws things up, and it screws up the ATS and looks goofy. People aren't used to doing that. So if your retail experience was several jobs ago, leave it in that same chronological order, but then highlight it in the summary. I think that's a good solution.
Yeah, I think the other thing is I'm going after. I may be going after some small companies. I just left a Robert Half assignment with Pfizer. But I'm looking at some smaller companies, and I may want to get rid of my international focus.
Yep.
And so,
that's a
and
real good point. I'm glad you brought that up.
I just wanted to mention while we're on that, and before we leave it completely, the sole purpose is not to have the #1 resume. It's only to get an interview, to get in front of somebody. So it's always important to keep that in mind.
Yeah.
Awesome. Yeah.
Thanks, Steve.
Yep.
So here's something regarding live events. No eating or drinking. If you go to a live networking event, now again, this may be controversial, and you guys can't see my picture, but this is coming from a guy who hasn't missed many meals. But even I don't eat or drink at a live event. Are you really that hungry? Do you need to go there to eat and drink? But think about it. I mean, I've seen people, they've got a plate of food in one hand, they got a drink in the other hand, and they're trying to network with people. How do you shake hands? How do you have a conversation with people? Anytime there's somebody asks a question, their mouth is full, it just doesn't work. So any event planner on the call is probably going to be upset with me because now they're going to have a lot of food go to waste or whatever. But nothing good comes from people eating and drinking at the event. If you have to drink, I suggest getting some water, some sparkling water or something like that, and just kind of fake it. But there's no reason to these are usually an hour or less. It's not really worth it, especially if you're in the job market. Now, if you got a job, you're not interested in connecting with anybody job related, then eat and drink all you want. But while you're in the job hunt, I'd suggest foregoing any kind of eating and drinking at these live events. And then the last one, again, none of these are earth-shattering. That if you don't do these, is going to kill your chances forever. That's not the case. But the placement of your name tag sounds like a minor thing, but it's not. Typically, most of us are right-handed. You get one of those stick-on name tags, you put it in your right hand, you go across your chest, and you slap it on your left lapel, right? That's just normal. That's the most comfortable way to do it. But that's the wrong side of your chest. It should be on the right side of your chest. So, and the reason for that is when you extend your hand to shake hands, assuming we still shake hands in this world, the name tag comes out and it's prominent and comes closer to the person so they can see your name. Write your name clearly, put it on the right side of your chest, the right lapel, I'm not sure what the equivalent is on a woman's outfit, but the right side of your chest. And then when you extend your hand, the name tag comes out in the forefront, makes it easy for the person you're meeting with to know your name. And that's what you want to do. It's a little thing, but it drives me crazy when I see people not do that. I love it when, and you'll maybe notice it now too, when you go to live events. The people that have it on the right-hand side, I look at that and say, okay, there's somebody who knows what they're doing, or somebody who's in sales or whatever. That's something they teach you in sales school. That's one of the easy thing to do to make sure that your name is known to the people you're talking to. All right. All right. So I've got a video I'm going to play here before I get into interviewing mistakes. So hopefully my interview is going to, or I'm sorry, my video is going to work here. Let me, and if you guys could give me a thumbs up if you can see the video. Can you guys see what I'm?
Seeing you highlighted, you're highlighting the hyperlink, but nothing's
Okay.
happening. Okay, hang on.
All right. Yep. So that changed. Let me share sound. All right. Do you guys see that? So the screen change?
Yep.
Yes.
And you see
There you go.
sitting
Okay.
you
Go
see
ahead.
two guys sitting at a
Yep.
desk, right?
Absolutely. Got it. Good.
All right. So here we go.
Coming in and sitting down with us, we're really excited to meet a few good engineers to join the Pied Piper team.
So why don't you tell us a little about yourself?
I don't work before noon or after 2 p.m. And I need to bring my dog to work. Are you dog friendly?
Oh yeah, you can bring your dog to work.
That's not what I asked. Are you dog friendly?
Nice pool. Can my dog go in?
Yeah, we're very dog friendly.
Is there a lifeguard? Because my dog can't swim.
Now it says here on your resume that from 2010 to 2011, you crushed it.
That's actually an old resume. It should also read that I crushed it from 2013 to present.
So are we to understand that you did not crush it in 2012?
There was a medical situation preventing me from crushing it to my usual standards, so I had to take some time off until I was able to crush it at 100%, at which point I resumed crushing it full time.
So it says here that you're proficient in C++, code assembly for multiple processor architectures, and that you are a cyborg?
That is correct. Short for cybernetic organism. I came into this world of filth and pain with a congenital heart condition, requiring the installation of a pacemaker, upon which I am mortally dependent.
Wow, he's technically a cyborg.
Yeah, it makes the resume accurate.
Look, load more money working for some multicolored happy town in a hermetically sealed box. But permission to be honest.
Permission granted.
Granted.
I like that you guys are so weird.
Yes, we are the weird ones. Thanks for coming in.
All right. Sorry about that. I try to end it here.
That was great. Thanks, Mike.
So, have you guys seen that before?
No.
Oh,
Nope.
Yeah, so it's a show on HBO called Silicon Valley, but yeah, you get the point. Those are mostly tech guys, but just obviously not something you want to do as far as your interview goes. But I just thought that would be a little amusing start to the interviewing. So let me ask you: do you see the PowerPoint again?
Yes.
All right,
Good.
good. All right. So interviewing mistakes, make sure you look professional, even if it's on Zoom. People tend to let their guard down when they're on a video call, and they don't, especially if they're at home, they don't necessarily dress for business or dress for the interview. So make sure you dress appropriately. And then beverages, I've seen this a lot. People bring in coffee into the interview, or especially on a video interview, you've got your beverages, you got your coffee, you got your water. I mean, yeah, I know everyone needs to be hydrated. You're not going to be dehydrated if you just forego your water for the hour interview or half-hour interview. So just avoid that. And again, it just looks weird, especially on video, if you're to be drinking. It's a distraction. The microphone picks up a lot of sound. So if you're sometimes like me and slurp your coffee, or say, do a at the end of the coffee, that's really weird. You just don't want to. You just want to avoid that. Other mistakes: not knowing much about the company or not knowing much about the interviewer. There's lots of stuff you can do to research the company and research the interviewer before your scheduled interview. So make sure you do that. Glassdoor, you guys know about Glassdoor. You can go there, and sometimes it's people post things there anonymously, and sometimes it's negative or disgruntled employees. So take it with a grain of salt. But there are oftentimes information there about the types of questions they ask during an interview, types of information about their culture. You get little tidbits from former employees or even existing employees on Glassdoor. I think it's it's a paid for site, but I think if you contribute, it's free, and there's some small amount of access you can have to it, and it's no charge. So try that a little bit. Also go to LinkedIn, see what kind of people they hire. Resist the temptation to link in with anybody from that company. Save that until you get hired. It's just kind of weird to do that ahead of time. A mistake that people make is they skip the small talk. They get right into business. Now, again, you got to kind of work at the pace of the interviewer. But if the interviewer wants to talk about certain things that they might have in common and common interest, that's fine. Just make sure you don't use up all of your allotted time talking about that. So you don't want to extend it too long, but you also don't want to skip it so that you just get down to business right away and you miss that personal connection. Again, it's even more important to do that during a video interview where you may not be in person and they may not be able to read all the body cues, all the body language cues, or other things you might do in a face-to-face interview. Another mistake is not having an elevator pitch prepared. I know you guys have talked about this before in previous presentations. I saw Patricia's presentation, was it last month or a couple of months ago? Again, know your value, focus on what they want to hear. So you may have to modify, similar to modifying your resume, may want to modify your elevator pitch depending on the audience. But again, highlight what they want to hear, what's important to them. And then rambling, not getting to the point. Big issue. A lot of people, I've heard interviewers say, well, tell me about yourself. And then they start off, well, I graduated from college back in 1980. No, that's not what they're looking for. They want to know what's relevant today. What can you bring today? Start with the most current, bring it quickly to how it's relevant to the job or the company here. You don't need to go into all that whole historical recap of your experience or your education. Same thing when it comes to answering questions. You don't want to be too short in give one-word answers, but you also don't need to ramble. So make it concise, get your point across, and then move on to the next point. They'll ask if they need more information. They'll ask. And again, this takes practice. I suggest you find a buddy who can help you practice. Mistake is being unprepared for common questions. We all know you know, what's your strengths, what's your weaknesses, you know, why do you want to work here, that type of thing. But as I mentioned before, go to Glassdoor, do some research, find out what questions they typically ask. And if you, and then it comes time for you to ask questions. Huge mistake, and I see this time and again, especially when I was in the staffing business. Client says, "Do you have any questions for me?" And the interviewer says, or interviewee says, "Nope, you've answered everything I was going to ask." Big mistake. This is your chance to ask insightful questions, demonstrate your interest, demonstrate your knowledge or your command of the field, and to set yourself apart. If you have no questions, it just is a poor reflection. I can send you a list. I mean, it got to the point where I was trying to prepare my candidates to go in front of clients, and I would give them a list of questions in advance. I would meet them at the client site. I'd make sure that I'd tell them to meet me 15 minutes earlier than the appointed time. That would give them a little bit of cushion if they were running late. Don't be late, but oftentimes they would run late. It got so bad that I would then bring an extra portfolio in my car and pen, because people would show up with nothing to write with. You know, so this is in my point 11 here is not taking notes. You've got to have something to write with. Take a pen, take a pad. Don't bring a computer. I don't care if you got the magic electronic pen that you can write on your iPad and take notes like that. That's not the same thing. It's a distraction, and it just the technology just doesn't work well and gets in the way of building rapport and connecting with people. So, you know, bring old-fashioned paper and pencil in a portfolio, professional-looking portfolio. People would come to interviews with, you know, their shoes. I ended up carrying in my car what I called a candidate repair kit. The shoe polish, the portfolio, breath mints, you know, all the things that I just saw, you know, time and time again. A good candidate on paper, but then they'd show up for the interview, and they'd look like a mess, or they weren't properly prepared with something to write with. They also didn't bring their resume. They say, "Well, you know, didn't you email the resume to the client?" Yes, I emailed it to them. But when you're sitting there in the meeting, it's nice to be able to give them a piece of paper with your resume on it. Now, again, they may have already printed it out, but I don't want to put that burden on the employer that they have to go and print the resume. It'd be nice if you walked in with a copy of your resume to hand them, and then you have yours, and you're working from the same piece of information. And then not having questions written in advance. I would tell people, make sure you have questions prepared, and they say, okay. So I said, tell me, so where are your questions? Oh no, I have them in my head. No. Put them on paper. So, well, you know, should I show them that I have it on paper? Yes, you can show them that you have it on paper. God forbid they thought you were actually prepared for this meeting. It's okay to have your questions written in advance on your portfolio, and bring that out in your meeting with the client. Now, I suggest having, you know, between 6 to a dozen questions written in advance, but I'm not going to ask all 6 of those or all 12 of those to the same interviewer. Maybe I ask a couple to the first interviewer and a couple others for the next interviewer. Maybe I ask some of the same questions, just kind of mix it up, get different perspectives. But you guys know what I'm talking about. Just, you don't want to be a robot and asking the same 5 questions to everybody. You also don't want to extend the interview longer than the interviewer wants by asking a dozen questions, just one after another. That's not appropriate either. So you got to kind of read the room, read the interviewer, read the body language, figure out whether you know, they're trying to wrap up the interview, and you're kind of annoying them at this point by asking too many questions. But again, ask insightful questions about the company, your role, what's going to take to be successful. You know, those types of questions are appropriate. And again, I can send you a list. Shoot me an email if you want the list of questions that I use or that I prepare candidates for. I'd be happy to share that with you. And I didn't mention it earlier, but if you're interested in, and I know Feng has a resume review service, I'd suggest taking advantage of that. If you want a different, another perspective, I'd be happy to review your resume, no charge, no cost, whatever. Send me your resume and I'll critique it for you and give you that feedback. Again, I don't think you can get enough feedback on resumes here, especially if you're struggling to get noticed or struggling to find the job you want. It might be time to have another review. So, not being prepared for obvious questions. So RFL, reason for leaving. You know, why did you leave this last company, or why did you leave, you know, the companies on your resume, especially if they're short durations. So I mentioned before common questions that would come up from the employer themselves. You can get that from Glassdoor. Here, these are obvious questions about yourself, about your resume. So reasons for leaving. Why do you want to work here? And again, if a reason for leaving, maybe it's good to, in your elevator pitch, maybe you can talk about why you want to work here, why you left your current company, or why you're looking to leave your current company. You know, kind of work that in so that you beat them to the punch and they're not asking the question. You're addressing it head on. Strengths and weaknesses are obvious questions. What do you read? I find that question stumps a lot of candidates for whatever reason. What do you do for fun? Again, keep your answers short. You don't go in, you need to go into a lot of detail about it. It's not really relevant to the job, but the interviewer is trying to get a feel for you as a person. And then something I've heard lately is, what have you learned during COVID? I thought that was interesting, but for the last year and a half, we've had some extended time to learn things or to better ourselves. And if you don't have an answer for that, you're going to be at a big disadvantage. So make sure you have a good answer for what you learned during COVID. You know, not that you hate masks or you love masks, or you know you like not interacting with people. You like the isolation. Those are not good answers. Come up with something relevant to the job. And then fumbling the salary question. Again, interview mistakes. It's illegal in Illinois to ask for an employer, a potential employer, to ask you what your salary history is or what you're currently earning. That was as of, I think, September of 2019. But some people still ask it. They're not up with the law. But you need to be able to know how to answer. You don't want to answer too high, and that boxes you out of an opportunity. You also don't want to make it too low so that you're underselling yourself, and then they question, well, what's wrong with you if you're so low? And you want to answer in a way that is credible, but also lets some flexibility. But I'm not going to get into that. There's a whole lot of information online about how to answer the salary question. But one other thing to keep in mind is it's always negotiable, almost always negotiable. I've seen this so many times, and especially in this candidate-driven marketplace, it's rare that a company is going to come to you with their best and final offer the very first time out. So the savvy candidate will push back a little bit and try to get a little bit more. You don't want to ruin your chances, but you also don't want to leave money on the table if you get to that point. Again, good problem to have, but how you answer the salary question is an important one.
Mike, there's a question from the audience. Companies are starting up front with salary expectations from you without sharing target. Not sure what's below that comp. Hold on a sec. And then state of Illinois. Maybe Carrie, maybe you can speak to your question more.
Yeah, I've noticed some firms are starting up front and asking you pretty quickly, what are your salary expectations? And it bypasses the need to ask what you're currently making. And it's almost...
and that's the new way to ask that question. So they don't ask what you're currently earning or what your salary history is. They ask what your desired compensation is. And that is a more relevant question. So yeah, and that's perfectly legal. And again, that's tricky. Hopefully you've done some research, you know what the market value is for this position. You've done some research on Glassdoor or other places to know what this company pays. Do they pay above market, below market? You can get that information on Glassdoor, or looking at other job descriptions. You can look at the Robert Half salary survey. There's to find out what the norms are in your marketplace for your title. The competitors of Robert Half also publish a salary survey, so you can look at maybe 2 or 3 of them and average it and come up with it. But yeah, you want to. I've seen a lot of there's automated form, or it's an online form. You can't leave it blank. You got to answer something. So that's sometimes tricky when you want to kind of leave yourself some room to negotiate, so you don't want to go in too high or too low. And it's looking for a number field rather than text, so you can't really give an explanation. That's a little bit tough to do.
How do you get a sense of the value proposition? In other words, the service that you can provide to the company has a certain value to them, and that value may be way beyond what they're willing to pay. That seems to me to be a tricky area.
Yeah, that's tough to do in the front end, but yeah, I'm not really sure about that. When I want to go back to something, I just thought of something when Robert was talking about going after different positions. One thing you need to be careful of is who is the hiring manager, who is the person who is going to be interviewing you. If the position is an accounting manager role, let's use that as an example, and the hiring manager is a CFO, you probably don't want to have the fact that you're a CFO on your resume. A CFO is not going to hire another CFO. I've had to coach a lot of candidates in that situation, and the candidate was a CFO in a very small company, and they thought that would be a good selling point, that they could go work for this controller at a large company. Well, yeah, I've never seen a controller hire a CFO to work under him. It just doesn't happen. They're reluctant to do this. So you got to be mindful of how you market yourself and who your audience is. It could come across as might be a threat to them, right? So you've got to maybe dumb down your resume a little bit to appeal for some of these positions. I also suggest the temporary route. Some people are going to hold out for a permanent job, or they're only going to work with recruiters who can find them a permanent job, and that's fine if you're currently employed. But if you're not employed, I suggest trying out the temporary route, doing some interim projects, working with a firm like Robert Half or somebody like them that can place you in a temporary role. It's a better story to tell when people ask, well, what are you doing now? Or what's your current role? Also, it just affects your psyche. You just feel more confident. You feel more sure of yourself. It's a different, you have a different attitude when you're already employed, and you don't feel as anxious or as desperate for the next role, and it keeps you in the game. And I've seen about a third of the temporary placements that I made turned into full-time permanent jobs for my candidates. The client falls in love with the candidate and finds a role for them, even though they didn't anticipate that would be a full-time role. So just something else to consider. Continuing on with interviewing mistakes, just bad mouthing past employers or bosses or anyone you ever worked with. It's just, it seems obvious that you shouldn't do this, but I'm surprised that the number of people that still do. And even, experienced people like us, you just can't do it. You can't badmouth anybody, or always look for, go back to the reason for leaving answer, try to figure out a way that you can say that you're leaving for a better opportunity. Don't say anything about the culture or your boss or people around you, or any how they done you wrong. I mean, that's all in the past. Nobody wants to hear that. As soon as they hear it, they think, oh my gosh, he says that about them. He's going to say that about us. This person is bad news. You don't want to do that. Another mistake is not closing by asking for the job, or asking for the job may not be the right term. It's more like just reiterating the fact that you want the job and why you're a good fit. When time to wrap up the interview, there's an opportunity for you to either shake their hand and say thank you for your time, or reiterate your highlights or something that you want to leave them with a lasting impression, and just put in a few good words for yourself. Another mistake is if you're laid off, you spend too much time describing the layoff, and the point you're trying to make, it wasn't my fault. Fine, we get it. Just make the statement as a layoff. Here's what happened. Here's why. Move on. Don't dwell on that. I know it's a big deal. It's emotional for a lot of people, and they feel that they need to get their voice heard. Now is not the time to do it. And then describing yourself as no better than qualified. You've got to find a way to make you stand out. You don't want to be average. I've seen this time and again. It drives me crazy. I think it's. I went into an interview with somebody who was an Excel expert. He had the skills the client needed, and I introduced him to the client. The client says, "Oh, you must be the Excel guru." And the first thing he said was, "Well, I wouldn't call myself a guru." Like, oh my God. The client just said, "You're a guru. Why would you qualify that?" Back then, I mean, first of all, the guy knew more than anybody in the company there did about Excel. So why wouldn't he be qualified as a guru? But I think it's maybe more of the accounting mindset. We all kind of learn to be skeptical and to not exaggerate or inflate their qualifications or their numbers, whatever. And so that kind of, or be critical, and that kind of translates into the job interviewing and job searching. And I've reminded candidates about this time and again. Said, the client wants to hear about the 9 things you do great. They don't want to hear about the one thing you don't know how to do. But over and over, that's what I see candidates do. They focus on what they can't do. For whatever reason, it's just, you don't need to do that. And that's a huge mistake. And then another mistake is a poor answer to tell me about yourself. A lot of times this is your chance to shine and really highlight what you want them to focus on your resume, and they end up regurgitating the work history from the day they graduated college and going through, blow by blow. That's not appropriate. Get it tight. Focus on what's relevant. Focus on the most recent, and don't go into all that detail. It's just too much information. It's not relevant. It's going to hurt your chances. I've seen candidates do this when they talk about the PTO policy, or I really like how you got to, you want to show off your knowledge of the company. You've done your research, right? And so they bring up the fact that they like the company has a life work balance philosophy or whatever. That's great that they do. A lot of companies do, but to bring it up in an interview kind of sends a message that you're not about working too hard. You're interested in taking time off. You're interested in about life-work balance. Everyone's interested in life-work balance. That's great. It's just not appropriate to bring it up through the interview process.
Mike, I have a couple of questions from the floor. Tim says, I heard from an older white female good friend of mine that while I'm exceptional, my challenges will be that I'm, quote, male, pale, and stale. While we can't change any of those, we can demonstrate, and he paraphrases President Reagan's quote, that our, hang on a sec, I'm having some difficulty navigating the chat here.
I want to use my candidate's youth and inexperience.
Yes, yes, yeah.
Yes.
That our experience and wisdom can be worth more than youth and inexperience. So he wants to know from you, what thoughts do you have in overcoming these challenges in today's marketplace? And then for later reference, here's an article on the case for hiring older workers. So there's a hyperlink in there for anyone that wants to grab that.
Yeah, and I've seen there's a lot of webinars, free webinars, and free sources articles about that. How to, some people go in and they go to great lengths to hide the fact that their years of experience or their age or whatever. And I think that's kind of silly. It doesn't take much research for an employer to look you up on LinkedIn or Google you and find out when you graduate from college and do the math. Or find you online. So I would, go on the offensive about that and be bold about it and do just like demonstrate. Not necessarily use those words, but demonstrate the fact that you've got experience. You can pick things up faster than somebody else. You're reliable. All the things that you get with a seasoned employee. There's lots of resources you can find to go through, but I agree that that's sometimes a disadvantage, but I think that's something you should embrace and use it to your advantage in your situation.
Another question from Max K. As far as giving a reason for leaving, is reduction in force an appropriate answer?
Yeah, sure. You might want to say that, and I don't know what the reason was, but, people have a lot of good reasons with, because of COVID, business is down and we had a reduction in force and I was one of the people that was eliminated, one of the positions that was eliminated. That's fine. But again, I wouldn't embellish any more than that. You don't want to talk about politics or the owner had his played his favorites and I was on the out, don't get into any of that drama. Just state the fact and then move on.
Just a quick question. So then when during the process would you want to sort of introduce that topic? So let's say you just want to give a very quick blurb. It's the elephant in the room, and you want to address it probably, I would probably address it up front, but I'm trying to think in terms of when's the appropriate point to at least make it part of perhaps an elevator pitch, just trying to get your thoughts or insight.
No, I wouldn't use it as the elevator pitch, but shortly after that, I mean,
Okay.
and it's likely that the interviewer is going to ask you anyway. For example, when I was leaving Robert Half to come to RubinBrown, that's a question I addressed head on. That was part of my elevator pitch. I read Robert Half for 17 years. I loved it. They treat me well. Here's what I like about, my first love was CPA firms. That's where I was before Robert Half. I want to get back to that. This opportunity caught my eye. Boom. So it wasn't anything negative about Robert Half. In fact, I love Robert Half. They treated me well. Been there for 17 years. You don't stay at a company 17 years if you don't like it. But this looked like an opportunity more in line with what I really want to do. So, that it happened to be true. But also sounds good and is flattering to the hiring manager. All right, Zoom mistakes, improper placement of camera. So I see this a lot, that the camera is either too high or too low. If it's too low, it's not flattering to most people. Looking up your nose or up your chin or up your neck or whatever, that's not appropriate. If it's too high, looking at the top of your head, that's not right. People, you can't see me, unfortunately, but not making eye contact. The camera is at an angle, usually at the top of your screen, and that's not where you're looking, where the interviewer is. So if you want to make eye contact with somebody, you have to look at the light there in your camera. That's where you make eye contact. Most people look down at the screen where they see the faces, but you can't tell, because every time you look up to check to see how you look, you're looking at the camera. But when you're looking down, talking to the interviewer, you're not making eye contact. So that's something you need to practice. practice with a friend to give you feedback, but you need to look at the camera to make eye contact with the interviewer.
I've always liked the expression, look him in the lens.
Yeah,
that's
good. Good, Steve. Forgetting you are on camera. So, get the scratching, the rubbing of your head, the itching your ear, your nose, sort of get all that out of the way before you get on camera. We don't do this when we're in person, but for some reason, when we're on camera, we think that we can't be seen, and we forget some of that stuff. So did I lose my screen?
Yeah. Robert DeVille has started screen sharing.
Okay, I'll try to remove that.
All right, am I back on?
Okay, yeah, well, yeah, there you go. You're back.
All right. All right. So yeah, so don't forget the fact that you're on camera, and whatever quirks and things you do when you think people are not looking, everyone can see it on camera. So be mindful of that. Unprofessional background or distraction, phone calls, doorbells, dogs barking, washing machines, all that stuff. Those are just distractions. You don't need it. Go to a quiet place, or go into the office, or do something to make sure to minimize the distractions. Now, sometimes it might be cute if you've got a kid that walks in on your in on you or whatever, and you can don't freak out about it in front of the interviewer. Maybe introduce your child to the interviewer, but try to find a quiet place, private place where you can do these. Don't do it from your car. I've seen people try to do Zoom calls or video calls from their car. That just doesn't work. So even if you're not driving, obviously you're in a stationary spot, but not doing it. Don't do it from your car. That just looks not weird. That just looks weird. Work out the technical. Okay, here's something I violated this morning. Not practicing in advance workout. Turns out I did practice in advance to make sure the video worked and the sound worked, but then that screwed up my other video. I didn't finish this. Having a messy office or a distracting background, so consider a virtual background. So you don't have everything in the background that's going to be a distraction. Consider a hotel room. I did this when I was interviewing with RubinBrown. I went and rented a hotel room for a couple hours. I think they had a minimum of 2 hours or something like that. But one, I was working at Robert Half, so I didn't want to do it on Robert Half's time. I didn't want to. I did this before COVID, so we weren't versed in Zoom and all that stuff like we are now. But I needed a private area to do these interviews, and so I did it in a hotel. And actually, the hotel, it was a Hyatt, I believe. They set me up in a small conference room. They had the internet. They had everything I needed. I had my computer in a separate speaker, and then the camera for my computer. But it wasn't that expensive. And again, I did back-to-back interviews with the people, and I did it all from a hotel. So consider that, or consider a virtual background on Zoom, or all of them have it. Zoom, Teams, WebEx. You can all choose a virtual background. Not smiling.
An example of a background that would, excuse me, Mike, an example of a background that would be inappropriate. If everyone can look at Robert Johnston's image, I would think that would be a classic example.
Yeah, I think Robert's doing that for our benefit. I know he
absolutely.
Yeah, but yeah, that's a good example. And then also smiling. Some people often forget to smile. I would say put a mirror near your camera so you can make sure that you're smiling. And it also helps you to remember to look at the camera. If you're looking at the mirror, that just brings your eyes up there. That's something we do. We teach our salespeople when we're at Robert Half to make sure that, people can tell when you're smiling over the phone. Certainly they can tell if you're on a video interview. But oftentimes, if you are looking at the camera like you're supposed to be, you're not always aware of your facial expressions. But if you do it and have a camera next to the, or just behind the camera on your computer, then you can make sure that that you're smiling appropriately. Again, don't do research during the Zoom interview or the video interview. The interviewer can see and hear that you're distracted. They can hear the keyboard clicking. Just don't do that. Let's see. Follow-up mistakes. So here's the mistakes that people make when it comes to follow-up. They don't send thank you notes. Drives me crazy. You got to do it. It's a lost art. I've got a 10-year-old daughter. I'm trying to teach her to send thank you notes, whatever. But I would suggest an email note, a quick email note to each interviewer, thanking them for meeting with you and maybe referencing something, and then follow up with a handwritten note. I like the email because I can get it off quickly, right? So within the same day that I interview with somebody, they get an email from me. But maybe the next day I send out a handwritten note. I can tell you, I've placed over 4,000 people. I must have interviewed about 1,200 people in the 17 years that I've been with Robert Half. I can count about 5 handwritten thank you notes that I received from people. And I remember every one. It's so rare that people do it. It's memorable, and it has an impact. Now, I don't know if it's a difference between getting a job and not getting a job, but the people that do it just stand out in my mind. And you can really set yourself apart by writing a thank you note. And the question is, well, yeah, okay, just send the same note to everybody. They're not going to check, are they? Yes, they check. We all compare. Did the guy send the exact same thing? No, he said the same thing to me. And then all of a sudden your goodwill that you get from a thank you note just went down a peg because you weren't very creative, or it was just kind of a robotic response. So put a little something different in each thank you note so that when we do compare, we being the employers, because this guy was thoughtful and he referenced something that we discussed during the interview. This is where the note taking comes into place, right? So each person is going to tell you something a little bit different. So then you respond back with, reusing their words or reiterating something that they told you in the interview. Put that in your thank you note. Make sure they know that you were listening. And then when you follow up by phone or by email, I call it here the Neil Diamond approach. Remember the Sweet Caroline song, reaching out, touching you. Nobody wants to be reached out to. You're not reaching out to, or touching base or whatever it is. You're not adding any value to the interviewer or the hiring manager, wasted their time. So avoid phrases like that. If you do want to follow up, and I suggest you do, they say, we'll get back to you in a week. You don't hear from them for a week, maybe you give them 10 days or whatever. Shoot them a note with an article that you saw relevant to the industry. Or something about their company that you read about. You don't have to say, hey, I'm the guy that you interviewed last week and you said you're going to get back to me on Wednesday and here it is on Monday. They know. They know who you are. You now sent them something that you thought was interesting and relevant, and maybe it's relevant to a hobby that you learned that they had, or something like that. Just find any excuse to send them a note, brief note, just to keep your name in front of them again. If you're sending your personal emails, I don't know why this is, but people tend not to put their phone number in their interviews, in their email signature page. Make sure your email has your phone number in it to make it real easy for somebody to get back to you. Yes, they have the resume. Yes, they can go track it down and find out how to get a hold of you, but it's sure a lot easier if you have it in your email signature, have your phone number. Same thing on LinkedIn. If you go to LinkedIn, you'll see my LinkedIn. I've got my phone number right in the header. I don't know why people don't do that on LinkedIn. You put your phone number. Now, email, LinkedIn used to frown upon that. They didn't want you to use any other email except LinkedIn email. So sometimes that's not, but that's changed now too. So I even have my work email in there too. But if you want to get people to contact you, make it easy for them to contact you. So in your LinkedIn profile, in your email signatures, have your phone numbers available. I suggest also having your email, appropriate business format email in LinkedIn as well. You don't want to have your nickname from high school embedded in your email address. And then here's the last slide before we get to questions. People make mistakes on social media. So your LinkedIn profile doesn't match your resume. This gets a little bit tricky, especially if you're modifying your resume for a particular job and it doesn't really fit what you have on your LinkedIn profile. It's got to be close. You can't be you're applying for a forklift operator and all you've done is accounting your whole life. That's a mismatch. But you've got to have something generic enough in your LinkedIn profile that it fits a lot of circumstances. So, people will check. Hiring managers will check your LinkedIn profile to see if it's consistent with what you have on your resume. So make sure that the dates match, your former employers match, your education matches, all that stuff that you have on your resume should be consistent with your LinkedIn profile. And then not cleaning up your mistake is not cleaning up your social media posts and security settings. So we've all heard these stories that more and more hiring managers are going on to social media to learn more about you. So I've seen people lose job opportunities because of something controversial they had on Facebook or Twitter or Instagram or whatever it is. Every picture on your Facebook is you holding a beer or holding a cocktail or doing inappropriate things. Maybe you want to scrub that a little bit before that happens. Also, you want to change your security settings so it's not visible to everybody. If you got controversial political views or anti this or pro that or whatever, again, that has no or religious views or anything that could be controversial, you want to remove that from your social media posts. Not having a social media presence at all is also a problem. That just kind of is suspect. If all of a sudden they do a search on you and find out you don't exist on social media, that's also a red flag. So you want to have some presence, you just don't want to have an overly zealous presence. They also look for, if you're doing posts on Facebook or elsewhere during work hours. You're one of those people that are constantly on social media, and the time of the day that you made postings, that's going to be visible to somebody looking at that. So again, you don't want to. You want to clean that up, make sure that stuff isn't visible, or delete it from your and stop doing it going forward. And then friending or linking in with interviewers ahead of getting the job, don't do it. It's just weird. So people say, oh, meeting with Joe next week in an interview. He used his LinkedIn profile. While I'm on his profile, I might as well just click connect. Don't do it. Just wait till you get the job to do that. You do the research, absolutely, but you don't need to link in with that person. One thing they often look for, hiring managers look for, is if you're reporting your interview experience on social media. Hey, you just had a great interview with RubinBrown, and looks like a great company. You don't do that either, because that just is a red flag. Here's a guy who doesn't treat information confidential. He's going to be blasting this stuff all over, to our competitors or whatever, inappropriate. It's just too risky. Same thing they look for is if you ever badmouth your employer on social media. They'll look for that type of stuff as well. So let's be a little conscious of anything we do on social media is going to be visible to everybody, and just start treating it that way. So that's it as far as my prepared remarks. So happy to answer any questions, any debates or resignations or anything related to what I said.
I think that this has been absolutely fabulous. And from the, as far as the chats are concerned, we're seeing all kinds of positive feedback to your presentation, Mike. In fact, one such comment was from Joyce Gibney at Fang, and she has acclaimed you for other chapters. In other words, I think you're going to be doing this for other chapters if you are so inclined. I'm sure Joyce will get in touch with you.
Yeah.
But I'm seeing you know, comments like a lot of useful information, great, thanks a lot, and so on. There was a question Max raised, just to be clear, and I'm sure that this is a no-brainer. Just to be clear, when you mention a handwritten note, you are referring to a hard copy note mailed the old-fashioned way and not writing a note and sending a PDF via email.
That's correct. The old-fashioned thing, you know, you don't have to go get personalized stationery printed, although that's a nice touch. You can get just the pre-printed thank you notes from, you know, Walgreens or Kinko's or, you know, whatever, and then send those. But a handwritten note doesn't have to be lengthy, just jot down a couple of sentences, but it makes a big impact.
Carrie had to drop off, but it raised the question, what are strategies for a multi-person Zoom or virtual interview? And also, many companies are biz casual, and is it good to dress down to match?
Yeah, I'll take the last one first. I always like to dress a little bit more than, I mean, the client may tell you, please be biz casual, we'd be uncomfortable if you're not, okay. But maybe I dress it up a little bit more. You know, they tell me a polo shirt, maybe I'll wear a collared shirt, just so a little bit more than that. They tell me, you know, tell me please no tie. I'm not going to wear a tie, but maybe I wear a sport coat with an open collar shirt, just maybe a little bit better than expected. Once I get the job, yeah, I can dress down a little bit. But you don't want to be out of place, but you also don't want to be too casual. As far as multiple interviewers, that's tough on the interviewee. I've seen those. You know, you want to make, again, eye contact with the camera. You can get distracted trying to look at multiple people on the screen. I think the key is stick with your game, listen to the questions being asked, and then look at the camera. Nobody can tell if you're looking at them, because if you're looking straight at the camera the way you should be, it looks like you're making eye contact with each person. So in some ways, that's easier to do than if you're in a group interview in a live setting. So just keep that in mind, but just don't worry about, you know, turning your head from one person to another, because that doesn't look right on camera. You got to look at the camera in order to make the eye contact.
Okay. I also see here that Leora, who is the chapter coordinator or chapter chair from the New York chapter, has asked you for, what is it, Leora? October 14th, Leora? Maybe she dropped off.
Yes.
Oh, okay.
October 14th. Thank you.
October 14th. Well, that's great. Mike, can I be your agent?
And what is October 14th is another chapter presentation?
Yes, the New York chapter presentation.
Oh, okay. Okay, sure. Great. And I'll be happy to, anyone's interested in this, I'll be happy to review your resume if you want to send it to me. I can also send, if anyone's interested, the list of questions you should be prepared to ask the employer when it comes time for, do you have any questions for us? So you got to have those ready to go. And I can also share copies of this presentation, Jerry, if that's okay.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, I was just going to ask that. Why don't you, I'm sure we would all benefit from having your contact information in the chat. If you would care to do that. Okay, you've got it right on the front page, right?
Yep.
So people can take either a screenshot or jot down Mike's contact information, particularly his email address, and just reach out to him. I think that would be terrific. Actually, all the lines, I mean, nobody needs to be muted at this point. So if there are any questions that you would like to throw at Mike, I'm sure he'd be happy to take them.
Mike, I got a question. I just
All the way from Jakarta.
yeah, right. How do you handle illegal questions? I mean, I've been asked an illegal question before, and I don't know whether I should, be mad or I should just, sort of ignore it or address it or what.
Yeah, you gotta ignore it. When people ask the salary question, for example, when they're not allowed to, it doesn't do any good to blow up over it and call them out on it. Again, you're trying to get the job. You got to kind of put up with that. Now, if it's discriminatory or I've heard people make mistakes and they ask questions about somebody's family or their marital status, whatever. And me as a staffing representative, I will coach the client afterwards and say, hey, by the way, you shouldn't have asked that question, give them some coaching. Most times I find it's not done maliciously. They just don't know, or they're ignorant of they don't interview enough and they don't know the laws. But you as a candidate, not a good idea to get upset about it or call them out about it. You just kind of roll with it and move on.
Okay. Thanks, Mike.
Any other questions?
Is there yeah, I have one question. I have a robust LinkedIn page, but I don't have social media outside of that. I frankly just got tired of, like you said, politics and strange relatives and contacts. So is there any disadvantage there?
Yeah, I don't think so. If you got a LinkedIn page, I think that's enough.
Good.
Well, Mike, I mean, clearly, I think this has been an undisputed successful meeting.